Welcome back. The National Consumer Commission has made an urgent recall on several vehicle brands and models sold between 2014 and 2016. These include certain models of the Jeep Wrangler, Chrysler, Citroen, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, VW Polo sedan and Volvo. Let's get you an update on these vehicles. The Head of Complaints and Investigations at the National Consumer Commission, Prudence Moilwa, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming on. And in fact, Prudence, I'm seeing that some models, even going as far back as 2009, I'm talking about the Citroen, one of the Citroen models, has also been recalled.
Yes. Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for having us. I think it's very important to also note that these notifications were received from the suppliers themselves, because in terms of the Act, as and when they pick up a problem with the product, they have a responsibility to inform the Commission. And another responsibility that we then have is to make sure that there is a successful recall so that consumers are kept safe.
Mm-hmm. So, Prudence, what is the delay in these manufacturers recalling vehicles that were made available for sale? For example, the Citroen from 2009 to 2016, and then the Jeep Wrangler and the Jeep Chrysler, they were made available for sale between 2014 and 2016. It's more than 10 years ago. Why are we getting this alert now in 2025?
Yeah, it's one of the issues that the Commission would like to engage with them on. We're in the process of setting up meetings with them. However, from just experience, sometimes it does happen that some of these things are picked up over a period of time or after some time. You might find that this type of issues are only arising now after the vehicle has been used for over 10 years or so. And it's very important because we always emphasize this to suppliers to say, once you create a vehicle and it is still on the road, it is still your responsibility to ensure safety. So the issue of warranty does not feature in this regard because it's a safety issue. The suppliers will always be responsible for safety concerns that arise because of the vehicles that they have manufactured. Hence, that is a possibility. However, because it's still early days, we just received these notifications, I think from Thursday last week. We will be engaging, of course. The Commissioner has indicated that he would like to engage with the OEMs around just the time, actually, like you are asking, to just find out if it's something they observed over time or it's something that maybe they knew and had not communicated with the NCC. So it's one of the issues that we are planning to engage them on, just to look at the time lapse between when they discovered it and the communication.
I mean, it really does remind us of what happened with the Ford Cougar model some years ago, doesn't it?
Well, a bit of it. It's not necessarily related, but it's similar. It's obviously of concern because all of them are safety issues. I mean, when you look at the issue of the inflator of the airbags, while it might be related to the issues with Takata airbags overseas, it might also be just that it has been over time that they have known that, there is a risk of an explosion and risking consumers' life with the fragmented particles that might be spread around the car while it's still moving. So it's those kind of issues that concern us. And just like we did with the Ford Cougar issue, a few years ago, we would like to also, as the Commission, communicate widely, but also to engage with the suppliers to find out whether there aren't other underlying issues that are at play.
Yeah, if my memory serves, the Ford Cougar issue was a lot closer to the time of distribution of the vehicle. I think at the time the vehicle model itself was relatively new. Correct me if I'm wrong there?
Yeah, with the Ford Cougar, I think several years ago, what we had found out, if I recall well, it was just the manufacturing defect around the issue of the coolant. So that is what they tried to resolve in the beginning, but it wasn't solving the problem because the vehicle kept on catching fire. So it took us a bit of time, and I think, as you know, it ended up with us agreeing on a fine, I think in millions, I think it was about 35 million fine, wherein they had to then pay a fine in the way that they had responded.
Yes.
It responded to the issue. So even with these suppliers, including Volvo, Audi, VW, Polo, as you've already named them, our engagement really is just to check whether, in terms of the process of discovering this and the time lapse, as well as whether they did everything they can to prevent this from happening. Basically, what we look for is just in terms of the response after discovering the problem, whether there was any negligence that potentially put consumers' lives at risk. This is why we want to now start the engagement. So while we are a bit worried, we want at least to get the answers directly from the OEMs so that we can be able to put consumer fears at rest. And then as the Commission, as you know, we are empowered to only form a strong view after we've investigated. But so far, we want to start with the engagement. The product recalls were received in terms of legislation, which is the correct thing to do to inform the Commission. But we just want to see in terms of the time lapse, when did they discover it, what did they do, and when did the time at which they informed the Commission, is it within a reasonable time so that we can talk to consumers like we are now, ensuring that they take back the vehicles and the vehicles are properly, fixed, so that consumers' lives are not placed at risk.
So that was my next question to you, Prudence. You're saying the vehicles will be returned, and I imagine that the problematic parts will be replaced or fixed. But in terms of, how the Ford Cougar saga unfolded, what has the National Consumer Commission learned from how that was handled? Because if I remember correctly, a number of people wanted their money back for the cars. I mean, cars had gone up in flames, caught on video, doing the rounds on social media. People had bought the cars, ferrying their children here and there. Is there a possibility that I can request a refund in the context where I just no longer feel safe? Whether you tell me the part has been fixed or replaced, I don't want the car anymore.
Yeah, so in that regard, consumers will then have to lodge complaints with us. And also because so far, the engagement, like I said, is still early days. All these recalls notifications, we received them later in last week. The engagements are now starting. If you can recall with Ford Cougar, the findings of our investigations were around just the negligent part of it, and even the settlements that came out of it were as a result of our finding in terms of the posture of Ford Cougar at the time of the recall, and also in investigating what the cause was. So there were a lot of gaps that we found in terms of the version that was presented before us. Hence, active engagement with the OEMs is going to assist us as the Commission to get to the bottom of how did we get here. But another emphasis that we need to make as the Commission is we encourage suppliers to inform us, to notify the Commission as and when there is a product failure. So they're doing the right thing by informing us, so that they do not do what used to be called silent recalls. Mm-hmm. So once you start punishing them for doing the right thing of notifying the Commission, then they go under and start fixing the vehicles without anybody knowing while they come back for service and so on. So we are now only happy to a part where we're saying suppliers in South Africa are now alive to their responsibility of talking about what is wrong with their product, making sure they take necessary steps, and then thereafter making sure that consumers are safe on the road. Of course, our responsibility as the Commission is to assess the recall and see as to whether or not there were other actions that might perhaps have come into play, putting consumers' lives at risk, and maybe in terms of when they start communicating. And also,
and the Commission obviously brings in its own experts in that regard, Prudence.
Yes, of course. I think what we then do, we work with the Motor Industry Ombudsman. We also, in certain instances, when we can be able to bring in experts to come and have a look at this. I mean, with the Ford Cougar issue, they actually had to bring in their engine so that it can be properly looked at. But it's very important because with even our recent investigation in other industries, the reason why there were such heavy fines agreed upon, it was because they then did not play open cards with the Commission. right? Wherein we have to find the information for ourselves as the Commission, then we have a dim view on already. In that regard, we would want to go for punitive action.
So your advice to consumers now who drive this list of vehicles, and I'll read out the list at the end of our interview, is your advice to take your vehicle in today?
Yes, as soon as you can. Please book it in so that it can be properly fixed, so that you can be able to drive the vehicle. And in instances where you choose not to drive the vehicle, please contact the Commission. That option is always open for you to for you to lodge a complaint on the basis of a defective vehicle.